All right, boys and ghouls, this is number 16, the 31 days of Halloween masks. This is going to be a special one. This is going to be on one of my best pieces in the entire collection. Holy Grail type pieces. I'm going to take you guys way back to the old days of Don Post Studios, to the golden years of Don Post Studios, the 1960s. In 1964, Don Post came up with their new Universal Horrors line, and those masks carried into 1966. They consisted of 10 monster masks, which some were featured in that 1966 monster calendar. One of them being the Mummy. So the issue with those masks, they were incredible masks. They're so rare. Those calendar masks are probably one of the most desirable things in the entire mask hobby today, if you ask me. The masks were on the smaller size. Okay, people complained they just weren't fitting like they should. So around 1967, they resculpted some of these masks, one of them being the Mummy, and that is why you Don Post collectors out there, you know this. We have a Mummy A and a Mummy B version. There's two versions of the Mummy. So that Mummy B, they sculpted a larger version in 67, and that carried in through the late 60s into the early 70s. So I'm about to show you my genuine, real deal Mummy B here. And this, get out of here, stupid cat. Hey! This mask, this is a truly rare mask. This is a real deal vintage Mummy. However, the hands this Mummy is pictured with right now are the first style Mummy hands from that Universal Horrors line. Get out of here! Okay. These hands, let's start starting from the top. These hands are from that Universal Horrors line. These are the first style Mummy hands, which are truly extremely rare pieces. I don't even like having this one up in the air on this pedestal. It's freaking me out, but I'm going to show you all the angles of those hands. I'm going to show you a photo of the Mummy A in the calendar picture, and you will clearly see these hands. The top hand is going to be this one, and you look for this little, see this little swirly mark by my finger? That's a little detail you'll notice in that calendar photo at the top of his hand. But the Mummy hands were later resculpted in the 70s, and they were much smaller. Some of you may have seen them out there. I actually have a set of recasts. Hold on a second. Here's what they look like later on. One hand was closed like a fist, okay? The other was more of like, looked more human-like shaped, and not these big crazy, you know, fat Mummy hands that were wrapped up in the thousands of years ago in Egypt. So, oh shit. So this is a really, to me, this is one of my greatest pieces. This came from a good friend of mine named Bobby Beeman. He goes by the name Toy Ranch. Bobby had masks, okay, Don Post masks, I would drool over for years. I'd always want Bobby's masks. Many years later, Bobby decided to sell some of those masks, and a lot of them ended up here in the collection, and this is one of them. This real deal 60s Mummy B with those beautiful first version hands. I was told, somebody out there told me this was the only known set of these hands. I don't know. I'm not claiming that. There's gotta be another set out there somewhere. But these are truly magnificent pieces of Don Post history right here. This Mummy is seen in the good book in Lee Lambert's illustrated The Illustrated History of Don Post Studios. I'll show you guys what that book looks like in case you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's a big-ass book on the entire history of Don Post Studios. The second edition comes with a latex rubber slipcase, and it's nearly 600 pages. Woo! And I supplied some photos for that book. I was honored when Lee came to me and asked for pictures. I'm like, I will photograph whatever you need, and got my name in there in a few places. So check out that book. If you're really into things I'm telling you, this is nothing compared to what you will read in Lee's book. I'm telling you, that is the end-all be-all history of Don Post Studios. So the little bit that I know about this head is it needed some help. I think, I'm not sure if Kelly Mann was the one that did some work to this to get it whipped back into shape, but you could tell this is a really old piece, and there's nothing like a vintage mummy. You know, I've got quite a few new castings of mummies out there, which I may show you in a few minutes, but I really want you to see. This thing looks like it's out of a museum, you know? Like, look at the texture, and it's just so old. You could definitely tell a 1960s mask when you see one. This is truly a magnificent mask. I'm going to show you. I'll lift up this hand now. These are big. You know, the original Don Post hands were nice and big. Those of you that get recasts that have been out there, they're much smaller than the originals, but they're still pretty detailed. They just shrink in size. But talk about some of the rarest stuff in this room. You're looking at it right now. So in 1964, that Universal Horrors line came out, but that name, Universal Horrors, pretty much ended in 66 with the monster calendar masks that you all know. But this was still a Universal Monsters character, and that went on. This mask was sculpted in 67, and it lived on through the early 70s, the Mummy Bee. And they actually brought the Mummy Bee back with the 98 reissue calendar project. So you got the early 60s Mummy A version that was seen in the calendar, and then you also got the later 60s version. That was awesome that they did that. This is the crazy looking hand. Look at that thing. And these are really in great condition. They were foam filled a long time ago. See that aged foam there? If they weren't, I doubt we would be looking at them right now. I could tell you that. I'm going to show you another mask that originated in that Universal Horrors lineup right now. The Frankenstein in the first run of the Universal Horrors 1964 masks was made by molding the actual prop head that was used in Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. In the very end scene when the monster was on the pier on fire, it was a dummy, and that prop head they used for that dummy is what they molded to use this. And this here is the first version of the Universal Horrors Frankenstein. Okay? It's nicknamed the Smooth Frankenstein because it was like a prop head, so it wasn't full of crazy detail and this big forehead. He just looks smoother than your other Frankensteins. This first version is really, really rare. I'm going to show you one of the original ads where this was still seen for sale around 1965 or 1966. However, a lot of people were complaining. Now this copy here is gravity has really affected this mask. You could see his eyes are drooping. I actually did a few heat treatments to get this thing looking better. It looked a lot worse. And it's like I can only go so far with things before I worry about them starting to break and crack. This came out, as far as I know, in 2 different colors. There was like a grayish version. This olive colored version is really, really rare. I've spoke with my elders in the hobby, and they don't really even remember it being released in this color, which is, you know, it's pretty awesome. And it's definitely that 60s release smooth. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. But I got this mask from a guy in New York who he saw my collection online. Somehow saw my collection online. He had this mask since he was a little kid. He kept it for forever, since the 60s. And he found me, and we talked and talked and talked about this thing. And I'm like, if you ever sell this mask, I think it was like somebody, he was trying to get information on it through, I think through my friend Bobby. So he wanted to do something with it. And Bobby said, you should talk to me. I think he was wanting to restore it or something. And we started talking, and the more we talked, I'm like, man, I will pay you a nice chunk of money for that mask. And restoring it is really, really tough. So after about 2 months of going back and forth, he ended up selling it to me, and he was happy where it was ending up. And I mean, this is the first one I've ever seen. There are 70s versions of this mask, okay? They came back out with this mask around 1974, I believe, which I have one here. I'm going to show you that one next. And I have the 1976 release of this mask. So there was 3 smooth Frankensteins. They came out 3 different times, okay? And this, so pay attention now. The Universal Horrors 1964, 1965 masks were small. And that is the reason Don Post had Pat Newman sculpt a new Frankenstein. And that is the amazing Glenn Strange that is seen in the calendar. I'll show you that calendar photo now. Every one of you probably have seen this once in your lives. So here it is. That's a famous photo, especially in this hobby. This mask is the reason we have that mask. So she sculpted it bigger, and then this one was not produced anymore. But they did end up releasing it again in the 70s, and then twice. So it was still small. It ain't like they blew it up or anything, but I was glad they did produce it, because they're some of my favorite masks I have in the collection. So now I'm going to show you something pretty cool. Since we're on the subject of cool Frankensteins, all right? Let me get this sucker. This one. All right, wait till you see this. Hang on, I'm sliding them in here carefully. Speaking of the 1966 Pat Newman Glenn Strange, look at that baby. So, this is not a 1966 copy. However, it is one of the last copies pulled from one of the original plaster molds for that 1966 Glenn Strange. Look at that. Nice. See the flat head up there? And I mean, the definition of this thing is just awesome. That is pretty much the size. I mean, it is the size of a production 1966 Glenn Strange mask, like that calendar mask. So that Glenn Strange was an alternate prototype that was made back during that whole 1998 reissue project. And they must have made a couple different ones, but that's one of the remaining 3 copies out of a original factory Pat Newman mold. Just incredible. Look at that. I know who did the hair on that one. That's easy for me to tell. Mascahuna did that. The best Frankenstein hair. So I actually have a photo of this thing on a full figure when it was living in a collection in Hawaii many years ago. Check this out. Pretty wild, huh? All right, now I'm going to put the prototype back and bring out the 70s version of that Universal Horrors mask on the left there. So let me grab it. All right. Here you can see a better shaped version of that guy. The eyes are nicer and like straighter. See that? Versus that dude looks like he's had a really rough weekend. In the 70s, these were released in a flesh tone version. Keep in mind, this is really aged. Okay, they looked different when they were brand new. I actually have a modern one by Kathy Tharp that should give you a better idea what these probably looked like in the 70s when they were new. I'll show you that really fast. See that guy down there? That is the flesh-colored rub-out done by Kathy Tharp on a casting of that smooth Frankenstein. So that's a modern pull, and probably more what the mask looked like when it was new. So like I was saying, this came out in 74, I believe, 1974, and they're still small. So I don't really know why they brought them back, because they were so small, you know? They probably didn't fit too many people. But that's definitely the 70s release of that one. And going back to dating this as a 60s copy, okay? How we know that is, the way to tell is the hair. So in the 70s, they were laying the hair in different patterns here, okay? And they glued the hair on these masks, like starting in the center and working their way out in a pattern. Back in the 60s, you'll see there was a seam here in the middle, like a part, where they put these strands of hair forward and glued them between these metal pieces. Here they glued it here and came straight back. So masks, Frankenstein masks produced in the 60s will have, you know, this part in the hair. And that actually, I think that goes up till the early 70s, around 73, they were still doing that. 74, 75, boom, there you go. They changed it back to that style now. See that? Well, not back to that style, but that was the later style. Looks a lot better. You don't have that crazy seam. So, this mask came out another time. So this mask was released one more time in 1976 in a gray version. I got him too. Let's scoot these guys over. All right. And look at, first of all, look at these hands. These are amazing. This, having a set like this, a match set, is insanely rare. I know of another out there that a fellow collector has, but you're looking at a very, very rare Don Post set right now. And I can't, you know, once again, this came from Bobby, and I could not believe he sold it to me when he did. And I've got pictures of me picking it up at Mask Fest from him, where I looked like I was so happy. I was holding them in my hands. I couldn't believe I was finally bringing these home. Truly one of the best scores I ever got. You're looking at it right there. So, and these hands are the same hands like the ones I restored with that 73 Karloff. Same mold, all right? But these are what they looked like in the flesh version with this dude. All right, let's grab that 76. All right, here's the last mask I'm featuring on tonight's video. The 76 smooth version Frankenstein. You got the 60s, like the 65, 64, 65, the 74, and the 76. All small. However, I did get this thing on my head before I had it foam filled. This is a really rare. These are all very, very rare masks. I owe it all to my friend Billy Kirkus for this sucker right here. I was out of town or something. I don't know. I travel a lot, and this thing popped up on eBay with a buy it now for only like $400. And nobody else in the hobby would do this. All right. And once again, nobody else in the hobby would do something like this. He goes, "Hey, I got you something last night. I know you're really into." And he's a big Don Post collector. I'm still shocked that he did this. He bought it. He goes, "I scored you a rare Frankenstein. Just pay me later for it. I'll send it to you when you're home." And I saw it and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You know, $400, I would have went. If you knew what this set cost, you would not believe it. So this was an unbelievably cheap cheap price for this mask. Depending on who you talk to, though, there's some guys out there that think every mask should still be $10 these days. But this is the world we live in. Things get expensive when they're very rare. And that, my friends, is going to be the closing of this video. We've started with an extremely rare mummy, and we're ending with 3 very rare Frankensteins that I love so much. And this was number 16. We'll go to number 17 next tomorrow. I'll start digging out some more rare stuff and see where this takes us. All right, thanks for watching.